the show went to help us maybe do a better job next year, or if everything seemed to go well with you, then we can try to keep it the same. Next year, it hopefully will be different and maybe back to more normal times. We're all hoping for that. So I guess that's just about all I had to say. Anybody else? Barbara, did I leave anything out, or are we good?
You know, just if everybody were watch for the survey that's going to come out for your thoughts on the show, and be sure to give us your feedback and commentary so we can continue to try and make the show better every year.
Thanks. Sandra, was somebody, I didn't print out the agenda. Was somebody
Carol Blackwood would be next.
Okay, great. There you go, Carol.
Okay, I'm unmuted. We just finished up our seminar with Russell, and I, for one, had a great time, and so did everybody else seemed to that was there. We all ended up with a painting, more or less, that we like. You know, it's always a surprise what you end up with. It's like, isn't what I intended, but it looks pretty good. And we learned a great deal of things from him. We will have our last seminar of the year in May, 14th and 15th, I think. I should have written that down, but I didn't. And that will be our collage landscapes with Julie Larkin. And so all you people need to sign up for that, because it looks like it's going to be a humdinger, as they say. Collage is something I've never really done much of, so I'm really quite interested in that. But and our next year, it will be Sonia Dimmler who's doing the workshop coordinating. This was the only real one that I had to do. Most of them had been Zoom. So, but anything else that I need to say, Barbara or Sandra? Or
No, you can just pass it right on.
I also didn't print it out. Sorry, I've been outside.
Okay, you're passing on to Alex, who is our grants coordinator.
Okay. Alex, over to you.
Alex, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I am. Nothing really to report. Only thing I have to do is get a couple of things up on our website about the Midland Gives. But other than that, you know, waiting for all of this fog to lift so I can apply for more grants. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
I think I'm next.
No, Alex was going to give the proposed slate of officers and tell about voting.
Oops. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. What did I do with it? I just had it. Hold on a minute. Okay.
This would be just the executive officers that will be voting.
Okay. The executive officers are President Kay Fox, Vice President Deb Kelly, Secretary Laney Williams, Treasurer Maureen Carter, Parliamentarian Sandra Oliver, and then I guess, do you want me to webmaster Barbara Tusink, but that has to be that has to go through the change in our Constitution.
Right.
But and then we're going to have all of this up online. And if you have any changes or any other people want to put themselves out there, you can, and we'll vote. Are we going to vote on this at the May meeting? Is that correct?
No.
No.
At the May meeting, we will have open the floor for any additional nominations.
Okay.
But,
all right.
the slate of officers will be available for online voting right after this meeting, and it'll end at noon on May 17th.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's okay.
Also, we still need 2 people and the committee chairs, publicity and refreshments. If anybody would like to, I mean, depending on what the whole thing's going to be like, but definitely publicity. There's information on the two committee chairs on our website that you can look and see what their job descriptions are. I have to say that, and I don't know how everybody else feels, the board feels, but we all sort of help each other out. So it's not just one person that does the job, it's the village that helps. So, and anybody who's new, we're all here for you. So, just ask us and ye shall find, but if anybody, like I said, if anybody needs that publicity job or wants that publicity job or refreshments, then please let us know. You can email me, Sandra, and just let us know. Okay. Anything else? Did I forget? I'm sorry.
No, you're passing on to K Fox.
Yeah.
Okay. K Fox.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
First thing I'm going to talk about tonight is our Member of the Year nominations. We have 4 people who are nominated currently. Maureen Carter, always at every function and willing to help and chip in. Great job as our treasurer. Sandra Oliver is another nominee. She's been president for 2 years, put together a plan for virtual board and league meetings to lead us through the COVID-19 successfully. She's accessible at all times and gets back to you quick, participates in every activity that the league has done. She's diplomatic, organized, enthusiastic, sweet, calm manner. Her kindness and reason in decisions help us, and she reaches out to make all members feel important. Another nomination, Kay Stallings. She led us successfully through our biggest Juried show with no co-chair to help her. So she did a lot of things on her own, and she did a great job. So the other one is Barbara Tusik. She keeps our league vibrant. She put together most of the videos that we've used for our Zoom meetings, the McMaster video, the Newberry Art Studio, Jan Swanson's, just to name a few, but she does a superior job of keeping our website information, our website informative, accessible, and current. Please go online and vote. Voting will start after the meeting tonight, and we'd like your input, so please vote for that. The next thing I'm going to address is our May members contest, South Carolina Feathered Friends and Wildlife. Basically, make sure that let us know, let me know if you're going to participate. We're going to try to do it in that front room. I don't know if we've gotten that cleared yet, but you'll have to bring your own easel to set it up, to set your work up. And remember that this is an in-person meeting for our May meeting. So you would come, set it up, and then we'll ask you after the meeting to take your picture down and take it into the tap gallery so we can hang it up. Or hang it up for us in the tap gallery before you leave that night. I think that if I'm right, we're thinking about starting to meet at 6 o'clock that night because we have to be out of there by 8. Yes or no, Sandra?
Yes.
Barbara, thank you.
Yes.
So just know that, and we'd love to have a lot of members. I've got a handful of people who's notified me that they're participating. I try to respond to you when you tell me, but please, if you can message me tonight or something that you're doing this, I would greatly appreciate it. It's just giving us an idea of numbers that so we'll know what we're looking at. And the next thing that
Alex has a
have
question, Kay.
Yeah, question. Yeah.
Alex has a question.
Yes.
How long is it going to be up? How long is the tap gallery going to have all that, the
It
display
will hang through the summer.
through the summer? Okay.
It will hang through the summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Sorry, I had that written down to say, but I didn't. Anybody else got a question?
Not that I can see.
Okay. All right. Oop, wrong way. There we go. Let me know if you have any questions. I know a couple people have asked me about what they're entering and if it would be, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. So, you know, I think we'll be fine, but please remember to bring your own easel because we do not have easels to set the work up. Our guest speaker tonight is Drew Blair, plein air artist from Blair, South Carolina, which is real close to Chapin.
He's not plein air, he's airbrush.
Airbrush, excuse me, airbrush. Anyway, he was born in New Bern, North Carolina, but raised in Columbia. Initially intended to major in medicine at Furman University when he went, but discovered he had an artistic ability that needed to be addressed, and he ended up switching majors and majoring and getting a BA in art. He's continued to study and to get his master's at the University of South Carolina. He's won the National Airbrush Excellence Award, which opened his career into commercial opportunities like the Budweiser, Frogs, Continental, United Airlines, Pepsi, Coke, McDonald's, just to name a few of his clients. Drew is an Air Force Association Life member, along with a bunch of other things. Check the website, it'll give you more details. His power painting is the #1 selling aviation print worldwide. And it's nice to have Drew with us tonight, and I'm turning it over to Drew.
Drew, you ready for us? He's out there. Drew.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, my mic is on. Sorry about that. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor, of course, for me, and I hope what I say will be interesting to everybody. I'm an artist like you, but didn't discover it till I was 20 years old. I took art as an elective in college and found out I could draw, and I liked it so much I changed majors. Of course, my parents weren't too happy about that decision because they thought I'd starve. And yeah, I did for a few years, you know, because I didn't know how to manage my money, but it actually, being broke and destitute and you know, starving artist actually was really good for me because it instilled a very strong work ethic. And so I learned to work hard and get smarter about it, and finally became successful as a commercial illustrator, doing, like it was mentioned, for a lot of commercial Fortune 500 companies. And but my background, my major is in fine arts, so that's always my roots. I try to come back to that. And then I started a publishing company that did really well, and so I retired from art, or from, I'll say art, from commercial illustration in 1999, and started teaching because I just love to, you know, reach out and communicate with people and connect with people. And of course, if you know how it is and you're in the studio all night or all day alone, you miss people. So finding a way to do art and connect with people was found by teaching, and that's what enabled me to get back to my to a little bit more of a social type of activity. So, and that's what I do now. Now I'm in Charleston. I've added another school to my repertoire. It's a school of more of a broad general school. My previous school from 1997, which I still have, is a school of realism. It's an international art school. And as they mentioned, it's pretty much founded in realism, photorealism specifically. And the tool I use is this tool right here. It's an airbrush. It's just a little, it's like a pen that you hook air to if you've never seen one before. It's basically, you put paint in there and there's a hose that's attached to it, and you push the button and out comes paint. It's like a little miniature spray can, okay? And you can control the width of that line by how close you get to it. You can get really close to it, like that far away, and get a pencil line, and you get far away from the surface and you make a very soft, blurry line. So it's very, very versatile. And also you can glaze and change colors instantly. So you can paint things very rapidly like that and make changes and really recreate reality without a lot of trouble. So it's an incredible tool for photorealistic imagery. As I guess we've got some slides here we're going to be showing. You guys can take a look and see kind of the things I'm doing. And of course, feel free to ask questions. I'm happy, I'll talk about my technique. I'm not sure what you want to hear, but I'm sure to I'll be happy to share with whatever I know, what little I know with you. I teach mostly about 40 years worth of my mistakes. So I've made many, many mistakes in my life, and a lot of it was to do with art, of course. I learned from those mistakes, and I kind of developed this technique and developed a special color theory, because the airbrush is a little bit different than the traditional brush when it comes to color. It lays color down in a different way, more like in a molecular level. So it's almost like a glaze continuously. You can change color and move colors around without mixing up new colors. You can actually mix colors on the surface in very subtle moves and very small changes. So in that regard, it's wonderful for recreating illusions of reality and mimicking photorealistic images and things like that. So if you have some slides we can show, I don't know if you have them up there, we can take a look at them. If you
All
can.
right, let me go ahead and pull up that screen.
Okay. And I'll just talk a little bit about them briefly. And, if you guys have questions about them, all my images are about, the size of my images is roughly about from 20 by 30 to 30 by 40. And this is a painting I did of one of my friends from Lumberton, Floyd. This took about 70 hours to do. And I try to leave my paintings unfinished because I want people to know that they're paintings. Otherwise, some people walk by them and just kind of glance at them a moment, think, okay, there's a photograph, and move on. But if you leave a part of it unfinished, like down at the bottom, the shoulders and things like that, a little vignette on it, it gives people this sense of that, hey, there's something different about this. Let me pause and give it a moment to study it. Okay. And what I'm doing for the hairs and things like that, I'm actually taking an X-Acto blade and scratching. I'll lay the paint down. I'll take a little X-Acto blade and scratch at these little fine hairs along the beard. You see those highlights along the beard. I'll scratch those out with a blade after applying the paint. And I get the airbrush very close to it, and I can make super fine lines. His head is probably maybe a foot across if you want to get an idea of the scale of it. And usually I don't work that big, but he had so much detail in his face and his hair that I decided to go ahead and attempt it at that size. Okay. All right, you can go to the next one if you'd like. Okay, it's my cat, of course, the animals too. And a lot of this is done with the airbrush. You can kind of see the softness of the fur. It kind of is blurry, especially down at the left side of the cheek. You can see that blur and onto the top of the head. And this is one thing I like about this painting I used to show my students is this is an example of what's called the etc. principle, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It's basically if you finish certain parts of the painting, a person will imagine the rest of it is just as complete as the remainder of it. In other words, they complete the painting for you. And this painting is very unfinished. And it's usually not until I point to it that people don't realize how unfinished it is. And I'll go ahead and point to it. Look in the ears. The ears are totally unfinished. They're just kind of suggested in there. They're not really at all finished. But when people first look at this, they don't notice that because when we look at reality, we tend to fill in the blanks. We fill in the missing gaps. And some artists take advantage of that by suggesting, and I know you all know all about that, suggesting certain parts of it and leaving other parts unfinished and allowing the viewer to complete it and therefore interact with the painting. Okay. All right. So next slide. Okay. This also, you can see this is unfinished. This is a portrait. This is from a portrait class. I teach the photorealistic portraiture. I believe a Swedish woman named Greta posed for this. The hardest part of the painting was not the face, but that darn checkered shirt. That's usually the pain, the clothing and things like that are usually much more difficult than the face. But this illustrates how the airbrush is really suited to this because it creates the most subtle changes in the flesh. You look at the flesh tones of the face, there's changes from the cheek highlight to the red in the cheek and to the left and right of that. It's very small differences in the colors. They're very minute. And the airbrush is wonderful because it can adjust those colors with just the push of a button in 1 second. And it lends itself very well to this. Okay, next slide. Okay, and also I do work, now I didn't put this on my resume, but I've done work for the CIA, basically to commemorate acts of valor and bravery where people in the CIA lost their lives in the line of duty. And this guy here was killed doing a reconnaissance. And you may not remember this, probably you're too young for this. There was a Pueblo incident where I believe Korea had seized one of the American ships. And this guy's mission was to go out and locate it. And I don't think it's the Bay of Tonkin, I believe he's flying over. And of course, this is hanging in the museum at the CIA headquarters. I did about maybe 15 paintings for them to give tribute to people who had sacrificed their lives trying to help the U.S. country. And before they'd only gotten stars on the wall. As you know, you go to CIA and there's a star on the wall and that's no story. But now, many years later, they're wanting me to tell the story of what happened. Okay, all right, next slide. Okay, this is a recent piece. This is one by Aiden. This is a male model. in the UK, and his name is Aidan Brady. And I taught this, I guess this about a year ago in a workshop. And of course, you see the bottom is not finished at all. Just left it blank pretty much so that people can recognize this is all painted. The challenge, of course, was not the face or the beard, believe it or not. The beard I'm scratching with a blade or an eraser, just laying the paint in there and just taking a blade and just scratching off the paint, going back to the white of the surface. And if it's too white, I'll tint back over it with a little bit of paint from the airbrush. But the harder parts were like the fabric, the jean fabric and the fur on the jacket and the stripes on the shirt. Those are painful. And you know, I usually try to prefer very plain clothes when I'm painting people, or just not at all, just from the head up only. Because of those, I guess I'm getting lazy in my old age. The time it took, now the first flight I showed you was 70 hours, and that was 2010. Now I've gotten faster and hopefully a little bit wiser about my approach. And this painting takes about 6 hours to do. So I've learned shortcuts and tricks to speed up the whole process to lay it down faster. We do this in a 4-day workshop. And I'll do a little bit, then the students follow. I'll do a little bit, and the students follow. And about every minute that I spend demonstrating, it takes about 8 minutes for the students to catch up. So I spend about an hour and a half a day actually painting. The rest of the time I'm sitting, waiting for the students to catch up with each phase of the lesson that I'm giving them. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is an older piece here. This is probably 2012. Again, just a demonstration of fur. And this is one of those things where I'm not using much photo reference for it. I had a portrait of a tiger, and a lot of it's brought out of my head. The whole background, the jungle and everything is completely generated from imagination, because I don't like to just copy photographs. I mean, yes, copying photographs is good if you want to exercise and practice and gain things, but you know, like they say, what's the point of doing it if a camera can do it better? So what I try to do is depart from the photograph and add things to it that may or may not exist in reality, but I try to paint a little more imaginatively, and I still try to sell it or pitch it as a realistic piece, if possible. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now commercial life. This is the Why Ask Why campaign. This is probably 1994, 93. This, I'm showing my age here. And this is another example of the etc. principle. You probably can't see it, but that lettering on the right side of the label is not finished. I ran out of time. They only give you like 2 or 3 days to do this because they need it right now. You know, it's for an ad. And so I didn't finish it. The art director never knew that the letters were incomplete on the right side. It's just gobbledygook on the right side of the label because I just ran out of time, didn't get a chance to finish the letters. But anyway, it was a good exercise, and it was for their ad campaign. And also did the Budweiser Bullfrogs. I don't have a slide of that. You remember that commercial? I think it was 94, somewhere around in there with the frogs. I illustrated that and helped conceive that and did a lot of work with them. So a lot of behind the scenes stuff, commercial stuff that I did. Okay, next slides, please. Okay, this is a very recent one too. This is about a 4-hour painting for a class I just did about 6 months ago. This is, of course, a snow leopard, and this is an exercise in just texture because it's fur. A lot of scratching goes on. I'm also erasing. But if you look down at the bottom right, you see a kind of a blurry purplish type of fur. Yeah, that in there, that's freehand airbrush. So you want to know the difference between the scratching and the freehand. The freehand airbrush gives a little bit softer line to it. So if you want things out of focus, you can use the airbrush freehand without any stencils or scratching. And the whole background is freehand airbrush. You can see that soft, out of focus background, and that's just done with the airbrush, and that's very quick. That's probably about a 10-minute job to that whole background. And of course, when you do the background, you've got to cover up the head of the snow leopard because the airbrush has something called overspray, which means the part of the paint tries to travel around everywhere. So you just cover up the parts that you don't want to affect with the airbrush, and you end up with a cleaner edge that way. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is another aviation piece. I'm also an aviation artist because this is 1990, and this is where the little boy in me is still manifesting itself. You know, little boys like planes, trains, spaceships, submarines, all that kind of thing. And it was still manifesting. I mean, I had a tremendous interest in flight, and I just thought it was so cool. And I wanted to see if I could demonstrate the dynamics of flight. So I built a model, hung a model from a string, took some pictures of the model, and then the rest of it was generated out of my imagination. From out of my head, I figured out planes flying real fast, and he's going to leave a rooster tail just like a skier would or a jet boat would. So I use this in my imagination to create this. If you look at the foreground, that's more freehand airbrush. See how it's out of focus and soft and blurry at the foreground? That's because I'm freehanding with the airbrush to try to make that out of focus to create that illusion of a depth of field here. This painting is about 40 hours. The dimensions are about 30 by 40 inches. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, again, this is a very recent one. This is probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And I leave my hand in it also, that you can see the scale of it because my hand is there holding the airbrush at the bottom as I'm painting. I've actually scratched out his beard here, and now I'm tinting his beard back because when you scratch it, when you scratch the surface, you end up with white, the white of the board or canvas. And the surface I'm using is a paper. It's either a canvas, but in this case, it's a synthetic paper. It's a paper actually I manufacture because I want to be able to scratch on it with the blade. A lot of surfaces like illustration board, they don't tolerate the blade. You try to scratch on it and it just destroys it. So I work with Hahnemühle, a company that makes rag paper and printing paper, and they developed for me a synthetic paper that I can use. I can put it through a printer. It's double-sided, and we call it airbrush paper, Blair airbrush paper, but it also accepts ink and watercolor and all that stuff too. So basically here I've scratched out the beard and now I'm tinting it a little bit because I don't want to be pure white. There's a little bit of color in the white. It's not, you see some gray in there, a little bit of flesh tone and sometimes in the beard, a little bit of brown in it. So I'm trying to just spray a little bit right here in the beard. I'm about maybe 2 inches away from it while I'm spraying right there. So it's not a very distant proximity. The closer you are, the finer your line is. You can make a line like a pencil if you get really close. If you back up your airbrush to maybe half a foot away, you get soft and blurry shapes. So the distance matters. It changes the width of your line tremendously, okay? And the medium I'm spraying is just a simple acrylic on here. Okay, next. Oh, the airbrush also lends itself very well to watercolor. In fact, it was born out of watercolor. They say the airbrush is discovered in the caveman paintings in Lascaux and 39,000 years ago. But it was kind of reinvented in the mid 1800s as a way of laying colors on top of each other without touching the colors underneath. So it's ideally suited for watercolor. It loves watercolor. You just mix the watercolor, drop a drop of it in the airbrush and spray, and it's amazing. So I'm using pretty much water-based items here. And this is another painting I did for a class. Again, a female. I think painting women is a little bit more challenging than men because the subtlety that's involved is tremendous because there's such minute nuances between the colors, and they're very, very challenging to get right. Because when you're spraying some paint on there, by the time you see it changing or you see the paint making a difference on there, you spray too much on there. So you have to back up and cover up the bad paint or scratch it off, erase it off, and kind of go back. It is very forgiving though. So if you make a mistake, you can recover. It just takes a lot more time and adds a little bit to the frustration, I guess, like any mistake does. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is a class I did. There's my hand at the bottom. You see the scale. This is a class on underwater stuff and atmosphere. And as a joke, I pulled out a pen and drew a little stick man diver at the end of class. It just shows I don't take my paintings too seriously. I just drew it in pen on the left side just for the fun of it to show I don't know why I did that. I guess I was in one of those moods where we're just joking around. I probably just don't take it seriously because it's just paint. A lot of the students, they become very, very emotionally attach their painting to the fact or to the point where if they make a mistake, they suffer tremendously. They cry, they moan, they become fraught with emotional disappointment. And I try to remind them, it's just paint and paper. It's not really worth getting so upset about. Mistakes can be fixed. It's nothing that can't be remedied. And that's what I did. I said, watch, I'll just draw a little figure on my thing and ruin my painting. And that's what I did. Of course, I could cover that with more paint because the paint I spray is both transparent and opaque. Sometimes I use transparent paint, and other times I use the opaque paint. So I have opaque and transparent paint. The opaque paint I can just spray on top of it and cover it up. So the question I just saw, how do you erase the paint? Well, I have a couple of types of erasers. One of the erasers I use, you see off my screen, is a soft, it's like a little Perfection, Faber-Castell. They're really old typewriter erasers. Those hard ink typewriter erasers. They don't make them anymore. Faber-Castell still makes one, but I try to find those old, really hard gum erasers that cut through anything. So the paint in this, and when combined with this paper, has a little bit of vulnerability to the eraser. In other words, it doesn't stick as tightly as it might to another surface. It's because the surface I use is pretty smooth. It's almost like photographic paper. You see the back of a photograph, how slick it is. There's a very, very small tooth on it, but the tooth is barely enough to hold on to it. If you take the eraser, you can actually erase it completely off. Also, the paint I use can be re-wetted with ammonia. It's kind of like gouache in a sense that, how gouache can be re-wetted with water. Well, you can reconstitute this paint by adding ammonia to it, like in Windex, simple Windex. You can spray it on and wipe it completely off until it just goes back to the white of the paper. So if you made a huge mistake, You can easily fix that, which is one of the best things about it, I think. It's very forgiving. Okay, next slide, please. Another unfinished painting. This is about maybe a year ago, October, for a class. Again, leaving it unfinished. And again, I'm adding a little more style to this. You can see the shoulders, adding a little extra brown and maybe punching up the background a little more, just trying to give it a little more of a, I don't know, something a little bit beyond a photograph, a little more added content to it, because I don't want to just copy photographs. Again, this is a very subtle painting. There's so many subtleties in her forehead and her right cheek. There's just the smallest nuances of changes of colors. But that's what gives it the true to life feeling, is when you include those, because as you know, nature is full of subtle nuances. And if you want to recreate those, you have to find a way to impose them into your painting in a way that gives that same sense or same nuance or same subtlety that you see in reality. And as far as the question about photos, I do, the first slide, I did take my own photos, and a couple of them since then I've taken them. I'm a photographer too. But I've gotten to where I've discovered these tremendous photographers all over the world, and same with stock photography. And I've just gone and reached out to them and asked if, after seeing them on Pinterest or on social media, I'll just write a nice letter to them and ask permission to, respectfully, if I can use it. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they grant me permission to use it for my class. The only time they've never say no, sometimes they just don't answer you. So I don't use it. I only use it with permission or if I purchase the rights to it. Okay. So how do I sketch? Now there's about 6 ways to transfer an image to the surface. One, as you know, is the grid method. You can grid. I don't use that. There's also a method called a projector, which you can project it on there. I don't use that. I've used to use all these methods. You can also use Surreal paper to transfer the image. You can use transfer paper and lay the photograph on top of a piece of paper and transfer it. You can hold it up to a window or a light box, trace it out that way. You can also cut out a stencil from a printout. Sometimes I used to make a photocopy, cut out the shapes of the photocopy and use that as my stencil to make sure my proportions are right. But lately what I've been doing is doing it by eye, just because it's challenging, and trying to recreate the same sense of the artist's hand in it. I'm trying to not be as mechanical as I was. I used to trace it. I used to draw it out in line art and everything, but lately I've gotten to where I draw it out without those techniques. Now there is another way that I check my work. It's called the flip method. And what it is basically you lay your reference on top of your painting and you get it in the right position and you lift it up and look at the painting and flip it back down, almost like an animator does, flipping it back and forth to check and make sure that your proportions are right, your eyes in the right place, your lips are where they're supposed to be, and so on and so forth. And so I use that to register and to check, make sure I'm putting the eye in the right place, but there's no tracing going on. It's really just from memory of flipping that image back and forth on it and see if I can memorize where that edge or that boundary or that border was in the photograph. I look at and I compare it to my painting and see if I'm getting the same proportions. Okay. I should probably look at the chat and see if I'm missing some questions.
Now you're keeping up so far. I have a follow-up to that one though, which is how extensive is your sketch?
Oh, it's just line art. It's just line art. It's not extensive at all. Basically, I'm looking for the boundaries of things, the overall boundary of the head, the shoulders, the outline of the lips, but I don't do the detail. Like I don't draw individual lashes, or I rarely do. Well, sometimes I draw individual lashes, but I rarely do. I don't do much of the hair except the boundaries of the hair, like the big shapes. I don't think of hair as individual hairs either. I think of it as groups of hair, like ribbons of hair, because hair behaves kind of like that. It doesn't do individual things unless I'm having a bedhead morning and hair sticking out everywhere. But usually hair flows in groups. And so I try to just put the major boundaries, try to establish those just so I have a sense of proportion, especially the eyes. The eyes I'll put the most effort into because that's, as you know, the most critical part of the portrait. If you miss that, then you lose that true to life sense that you would enjoy if you made otherwise a more accurate image. Okay. I hope that.
Move on. Yeah,
okay. And this is one of my first aviation paints. This is 1989. This is the one that when they were talking about the best-selling print in the history of aviation. I'm not sure why I didn't expect it. And this is me just being a little boy and try to paint something cool. And I painted it just for myself. And it was in my portfolio, and a publishing company saw it and asked if they could publish it. They print it, and they offered me 20 grand for the rights to use it. And I was like, oh man, that's so tempting. But just before I signed the contract, my brother said, hey, why don't we print this ourselves and sell it? And we can keep all the money, And so that's what I did. And I printed 1,000 of them. And wrote to Air Force Magazine and asked if they would be interested. And they, sure enough, they put it on their cover. And I said, what do they want? What did I want for an exchange for that? Well, all I asked for is a little editorial blip that said cover prints available, had a 1-800 number and the column. And so we sold for like $45 a piece starting out, and I had 1,000 of them, and they sold out in 1 week. So my bank account went from $0 to $45,000 in 1 week, and that got my attention. I'm like, oh my God, this print thing must be like a gold mine. And so I printed again and again and again, and it did really well. And eventually I made many prints, and had a whole series of aviation prints. And there's still a website where we sell them at drublair.com, and that's DRU Blair.com. And then we sell the aviation prints and military types of things. And doing this type of painting earned me the ability to take incentive rides in all of these aircraft, all these military aircrafts and helicopters. I've actually gotten to ride and fly them. And I'm not even a pilot because of what they wanted me to connect with the public, to try to tell the story of what they do and how they do it. And of course, the background of it is completely generated from imagination. There's no place that exists like this in the world. The plane I built as a model, hung it from a string over a mirror so I get a sense of reflection. The background and everything was just made up, just completely imagined. So kind of gives you a sense of how there's no place like that. It's just trying to make it more interesting. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, this is a more recent piece here. This is just a chart. This is exercise in something called caustics. And a caustic is a light cast by refraction. Okay, and you can see on the top of the chart all these refractions, almost like in the bottom of a swimming pool. The angles of the waves are changing, and it casts light. It kind of concentrates the light, and it's always moving. But it was really just an exercise on how, for my students, on how refraction works and casts light on the back of a shark or any object underwater like that. And it's called a caustic, C-A-U-S-T-I-C. And again, just an exercise in a great white shark. Okay. All right, here's a painting in progress, so you can kind of see how it looks when it's very incomplete. Famous actor, you may recognize him. And basically, it's just, I'm just working bit by, you can kind of see the progress. I work from top to bottom, basically. I start at the eyes usually. I say top to bottom. I usually start at the eyes because that's the part that is the most important to me. And while I've got the energy and the enthusiasm and the motivation to work really hard, I'll go to those first, and then I'll go to the top and work my way down. And the reason I do this is because by the time I'm at this point of the painting, I'm really tired of working on it because I have an idea how it's going to come out, and my mind is already, and my heart has already moved on to the next painting. So it's difficult for me to invest a lot of energy into it. So at this point, I've worked on it, and it's probably about 5 hours right here, maybe 4 hours of work here. And it might seem like a short time to a painting, but it's very intense. You know, I'm working very fast and very hard, and it's not like falling off a log. It's some mistakes. I've also found that the slower I go, the fewer mistakes I make. And airbrush is different than other things in the fact that if you do things in a certain order, you're rewarded for it. And if you don't do things in a certain order, you get punished for it in the sense that it costs you more time and energy. And those old paintings I did that took 70 hours, but because of my lack of knowledge and understanding of there's a certain way you sequence and things you add first. Like, for example, with airbrushing, you want to add the texture first. You add the texture of the whole face first before you add the shadows and transitions. Before you add the shadow of the head, before you add the shadow of the nose, you first put in your textures. And that's not very intuitive because usually the first thing you paint is the first thing you see. You know, the shadow of the nose sticks out a lot, and the shadow of the head and everything is very dominant. So the tendency for people with first start airbrushing is to do those first because that's what they see most predominantly. But in airbrushing, if you do that first, it causes you to suffer later. So I have to learn to do away with those types of approaches and try to follow what the airbrush prescribes for me as far as the quickest, easiest, and most productive way of approaching it. Okay. Okay, another commercial piece, Coca-Cola Splash. You know, this was a fun exercise. This is probably 1990, around in there, I'm going to guess. And my career as a commercial illustrator started probably around 1988 or 89. I used to be a t-shirt artist. I learned to airbrush painting t-shirts in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, starting in 1981. And painted on the boardwalk. It was great training, not a very prestigious job, but it paid really well. I think it was $1 a minute at the time, which, you know, coming just out of college was amazing, you know, to me. It still is, you know. This is another exercise in just depth of field. You can see how the water in the background is out of focus and blurry, and the airbrush does an incredible job of that. This is probably one of the only paintings I've ever sold. I don't like to sell my paintings. Aside from museums and things having them, I really like to hang on to my originals and go into print if I can. But at the time, I don't know why, somebody made me an offer and I just, I took it. So I kind of regret it now because I really like to, I really like to hang on to these paintings, and I've got many years of it. I probably should sell them for storage purposes though. Okay. Okay, this is a very recent piece. This is a wolf painting we just did probably about 2 months ago. This size is 19 by 13, so it's 13 inches wide, 19 inches tall. Again, on the same paper, and I'm using the airbrush again. And you can see I'm scratching out all those highlights in the fur and all that. I'm scratching that out. Now, for the rock, a different technique. I laid the paint on there, and then I took Windex and sprayed it on there, and then picked it up with a paper towel. When I picked it up with a paper towel, it left these weird textures in there and kind of give me a little bit of texture. And then I sprayed it again with another layer of blue or gray on top of it and built up these layers on top to give it more complexity. And finally, in the end, I lifted off paint to give those little white highlights and markings. Actually, those are probably bird droppings on the rock that he's lying in repose on. But again, another exercise. A little bit of snow is in the scene, a little snow on the, and this is I found this image online, the photographer, and I wrote the photographer and asked permission. And of course, she said yes, of course, and there it is. And I'm actually doing this in my, I own a website, I own a school called the School of Realism, it's schoolofrealism.com. And we'll do this again in October. I believe there'll be an online class in October. And we'll do the same painting again. I don't like to do the same painting again, but the first class sold out and we had so many people on the waiting list that I decided to go ahead and teach this one again, okay? All right, next one, okay. This is another exercise. This is a portrait class. I do portrait classes and wildlife class, things like that. And this is a male portrait class. I have female portrait class, children's portrait classes, animals, and of course, male and female, like I said. And this is a little bit of an ambitious painting, so I decided to cut it in half and not do the whole thing because it was just, we need to do it in 4 days, and a lot of the students are slow. So this took me about 5 hours to do it, but there's a tremendous amount of texture in the skin. You can see it on the cheek. But the saving grace of this is there's so much out of focus too. If you look at the ear and the shoulder and the top of the forehead is slightly out of focus, and that goes much quicker. You can just freehand and spray that on there with the airbrush, and you're done in a very, very short amount of time. I could probably do the ear in 10 or 12 minutes. It's done, you know. And I pre-mix the colors for accuracy because I want to make sure that I'm on the money with it. But sometimes I have to adjust the color after I spray it. Maybe I need a red to a little bit of green. And airbrush is wonderful that I can just put some straight green in the airbrush and spray it very lightly on there, just barely move and nudge that color a little bit greener if I need to, or a little bit red, or whatever I need to do. The airbrush is very forgiving in that regard. Okay. Okay, I know this is Australia. By the way, I teach all over the world too. I have, and until 2019, I used to travel over the world and teach because the paint I used, the manufacturer, I helped develop the paint. They said that they would send me anywhere in the world I want to go as long as I use their paint. So I took advantage of that from 2011 till 2019 of traveling to Europe and Russia and Australia and teaching and painting. And this is a class I'm doing in Australia on a golden eagle here. And again, the technique's the same. You can see the blurry feathers on the back of the head are very soft, and that's the airbrush is great for that. Where you see the sharp edges, sharp feathers and shapes, those white shapes near the eye, in front of the eye, that's scratched out with the X-Acto blade, or even a dowel. I'll take a wooden dowel and I'll sharpen it like a pencil, just a wooden dowel made out of red oak, and I'll use that like a pencil just to scratch. So you can use scratching tools too. To the right of the beak, you can see how that's slightly out of focus, blurry area. That's using the airbrush freehand without any stencils or mask or erasing, so I can get that depth of field going there. Of course, this is paintings are probably about, probably about 3.5 or 4 hours into it at this point. Okay. Okay. Another painting left unfinished at this point. This is my cousin Val, and by the way, I'm from Blair, South Carolina, which is not too far from you guys up. It's about 40 miles north of Columbia, between Newberry and Winsboro. It's out in the country, and I have a country cousin out there named Val Green, and he graciously posed for me. And I put some lighting. I took this photo myself originally and just really recreated my painting or my photograph there with some strong lighting, dramatic lighting. Again, the biggest pain in this whole painting, as you can guess it, is down at the bottom. That shirt was so nauseatingly difficult. It was just, I think it took me as long on the shirt. It's probably an 8-hour painting, and about 3 hours of that, or maybe even 4 hours, was working on that doggone shirt. And it was very challenging. The left side's not so bad as you can see it's a little bit blurrier and kind of washed out, and that helps. But that texture, that plaid texture, I could have killed him for wearing that to the modeling thing. But anyway, live and learn, okay? All right, I also paint on actual objects like cars, and this is a helicopter at Columbia Airport that's used to help, it's a a program that helps troubled teens, give them a project. So they work on these helicopters. It's an old Vietnam era Cobra helicopter. And to help these so Celebrate Freedom Foundation, as you can see in the background on the door. And my job was to put it in this camouflage, and the kids helped me work on that. They worked on the camouflage, painting it. And then I came in and decided to put a realistic shark's mouth on it. It's got a tiger camouflage. The Cobra helicopter's got a shark's mouth on it, kind of an odd combination of animals there. But I also tried to give the illusion that metal around the gums is rolled around away from me in 3 dimensions. So I took the airbrush and softened that up and darkened, put a little shadow there to give the illusion that the metal actually is bent down to the gums. So you can see right above the gum line, there's that rolled metal. And around the eye too, I try to make that eye pop out by adding some shadow underneath it. So I tried to add a little more photorealism to this element as well, okay? Now here I am painting on a painting. This is a larger painting I usually do of Tika, a Brazilian model. I took this photograph originally, and I always enjoy painting hands. So I painted this pretty much to do the hands up. You kind of see the line art. I include this because I want you to see kind of how much I add line art wise. And you can see at the very bottom, there's just some lines to show my boundaries and things like that. For her shirt or dress, I basically painted it black, and I went in with a blade and eraser and just scratched out little highlights, little white spots in it. And then in there, okay. Okay, Karen. Hey, Karen. Yeah. Okay, so this is the process. I kind of see the scale of this is painting an eagle up close, just kind of giving a demonstration. And I want you to also see that piece of paper I'm holding. The paper's got a cutout section. If you can sort of see, it's kind of a zigzag. And what I do with that is I use that little mask to kind of make shapes with hard edges. So I lay that mask on there, spray a little bit, and it gives me kind of an outline or a shape to kind of start building feathers and textures and edges that are maybe are much better served or much more quickly done than if you try to freehand or scratch it. So stencils and masks, handmade, actually can speed up the process and give you a different kind of edge too. Okay. Okay. And this is an example of, I just want you to see the sequence of how it begins. This is Gal Gadot, I believe is her correct pronunciation. Upper left is the first stage where I did her eyes and worked my way down to the lips. And once I got that established, then I started working on her face. Now, this is a really difficult painting. This was also done in class because it's so subtle. The lighting and transitions across her cheek are very, very, very small moves. And there's probably 2 or 3 dozen different hues in her face there, but I can make those hues by blending and overlapping the different colors. I can take yellow, overlap it with red violet and spray that on there, just putting the smallest amount of color down to achieve the goal. The neck and everything is out of focus. It's blurry, gives me a little bit of relief from having to put a lot of detail in there, but thought it was a beautiful, beautiful image, and I really wanted to recreate it. So that's what we did this in the painting. You see my hand at the bottom for skill, holding the airbrush. And at that point, I'm probably about 2 or 3 inches away from the surface. I'm trying to see if there's a place where I actually change something, because I'll change colors sometimes in a painting. Well, you can see the forehead, in the difference in the forehead of the second step versus the final step. I add a little more red violet to, you can kind of see, and that would just took a second to add a little red violet to it, just with the airbrush, just a dusting of it, and in just 1 second, instantly add red violet to a light spot like that. So it moves very quickly. Also at the bottom lip, on the right side of her lip, you see where I pushed a little bit harder for that highlight. There's a very small highlight there, and I pushed that highlight up a little bit. Looking at the reference now, I'm seeing my mistakes. Of course, that's normal for an artist. I'm seeing that upper lip, to me, looks cut out looking. So in that case, I would probably come back in hindsight and take the airbrush and soften up a little bit. You see that the upper edge of the upper lip's a little bit cut out looking. As you can see, originally it was against a white background in the first drawing, or first phase of it. And I failed to soften that a little bit. So sometimes those things get by you and you miss them, and you see them like a year or 2 later, like I'm seeing it right now. I'm like, oh my God, I missed something. And that happens, I think, for all of us. We get to the point where we're just tired of working on it. We move on and we don't notice the mistakes in there. Sometimes to help me see my mistakes, though, I'll take a photograph of my original painting, and that will enable me to spot things, even on my phone or in a different context. Like the old masters use mirrors and look at their work to spot mistakes and errors in their own work. And that helps a lot. And so in this case, I pick up my cell phone, take a picture, look at my cell phone and say, oh, that looks strange. I didn't notice that in the original. So that's a big help in using technology to help run down those mistakes. Okay. Okay, for about a year, my last tour was in 2019 when I announced I was going to stop touring the world. And that year, I really was in love with freckles and red hair for some reason. I just loved painting it because it's so complex and so interesting. But I learned very quickly that freckles are not just dots. There's a softness to them that because they're, they're beneath the skin, parts beneath the skin. And it's really hard to do by just taking a brush and making a dot. It's really difficult to do. So, but the airbrush does a really good job of getting that certain softness. Getting real close to make a dot with the airbrush, and you've got instant ones. So there's 200 or 300 of them there. This painting took about 4.5 hours though. And of course, at this point, I'm not finished it. Again, the eye is there for scale. But I did probably 7 or 8 different redheads over from 2018 to 2019 when I went through the redhead phase of my painting. Okay. Again, more horses and animals and things like this is in a class here, and you can see the left side's unfinished as I work on that. I did the background first in this, which is really unusual, but I needed something to contrast. So I put a mask over the horse, sprayed in the gray background, took the mask off, and then I've got a white horse, and I'm just filling it in. I'm using the eraser there's wrinkles in the neck. I'm using an eraser and a little bit of a blade to kind of scratch out those little fine lines, those subtle wrinkles in the skin. This is a very subtle painting too, the little shadows and things like that, really small scale, but very rewarding. This is about 3 or 4 hours into the painting at this point. I don't think we finished it during the class. I think we got about this far at the 4th day, just the front part of the horse. Okay. And then get more for scale. This is one of the, I want to show you this because this is the eraser I use. This is an old typewriter eraser. It's 40 years old, 40 or 50 years old. It's an extremely aggressive eraser. And it's used for ink removal. Of course, when the typewriters went away, so did the erasers. So I try to just hunt for them on eBay or things like that when I can see a bunch of them coming up. And now the problem is that people are realizing the value of them, so the prices are going up to like $20 to $25 for one of them. So, but they last a year, so they're really nice. I do sell these on my website, schoolofrealism.com. It's not a pitch for me. If anybody ever interested, over the years I bought as many as I can until I run out. I'll keep selling to the students. But you sharpen it not like a pencil sharpener. You sharpen it like there's more of a blunt tip. So I try to sharpen it like you would with an eyeliner pencil. You guys have seen the difference between an eyeliner pencil and a regular pencil sharpener. The eyeliner pencil gives you a shorter kind of point to it. Because if a point's too long, the eraser will flex and break off, and that's no bueno. You don't want to do that. So I try to sharpen it either with a blade like I have here, or using a makeup eraser, makeup sharpener, like for the eyeliner, things like that. There's little short types of sharpeners. And basically, I erase the highlights out. So if I want to highlight erase, I just erase it and I get back to the white of the paper. If I use a softer eraser, I can actually remove the paint and not go to the white of the paper. I can lighten it up gradually, which is great for softening and blending. Like there's a highlight right where I'm pointing to, right in the center of the head there, the nose there between the eyes, that little highlight. That was done with a soft eraser, a Faber-Castell Perfection 92 or 7058, I believe, 7058. Basically, it's a soft eraser, and you can softly remove paint without the harshness that this aggressive eraser does. The aggressive eraser will dig out, it's like an all or nothing, it just digs out pure white, and it doesn't allow you to blend. But the softer eraser that I use allows you to blend the paint and remove it. I think with this kind of paper, you could probably brush it on traditionally and erase it too if you put a thin enough layer on there. Okay. Okay, children's art, really difficult because the subtlety involved, and the skin is slightly translucent, and the hairs are baby fine. It's just really difficult. Again, the background, thankfully, blessedly, was out of focus for the fabric and everything to the left of the hand, and that enabled me to have a little bit of a relaxation rest, but getting those colors adjusted on there, and I push them back and forth, lightening, darkening, adding more red, less red. And sometimes I'll to get rid of red, I'll just add the complement. So if I got too much red in some, I'll overspray a little bit of green. If I've got too much green, I'll overspray a little bit of red, and so forth. So I'm using mixing complements on the surface to make those subtle adjustments, if that makes sense. Okay. Okay, again, this is just an example of an eye. I was in a contest in Japan for a photorealism. I was pitted up against their world champion photo analyst, and my job was to create a painting that could fool him. So they set up 20 images, 20 photographs, and one of them was my painting. And he came to Blair, South Carolina, of all places, and he went through the paintings. He eliminated all of them. He got down to 3, and he thought mine was a painting, and he actually lost. So I won that, and I went on to Japan to another TV show contest with that, where I had to paint a muskmelon, but that's a whole nother story. A lot of these images you can see on my Facebook page at Drew Blair also. This one was just an exercise. This is from that painting. That was a painting I did of the girl that they chose that I had to create, and I had to create it about 20 by 30 life size. So that was from that, okay? And this is the whole thing. So that first was the close-up of her eyes. Now you can see this is how she looked. And that was a painting that they selected, and I had to paint her. And that one took about 12 hours to do, because I had to do the shirt. I couldn't leave anything unfinished because I had to trick the photo expert. He wasn't allowed to get closer than 2 feet away, thankfully. Otherwise, I would have been done for. He would have seen it. The other question is, how fine a line can you get with airbrush? You can get a line as fine as a pencil, literally as fine as a hair with the airbrush. You can really get a super fine line. It does have different nozzles, but usually pretty much, I use this airbrush. This is airbrush I'm using that I showed you is a 0.18 millimeter nozzle. It's a very, very fine line. It's about as small as, it's like the needle itself is about a third of the diameter of a pencil lead, and it tapers to a point. The little point sticks out, and that needle, it guides the paint out of the airbrush. It's like a little spray can with a needle sticking out of the nozzle that kind of guides the paint, and it tapers in a way to help focus the paint in a small direction. But you can switch nozzles on it, no problem. You can change nozzles, bigger nozzles for bigger jobs, smaller nozzles for detail. Okay, was that it? Was that all I submitted?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Good. I didn't want to bore you guys with all that. I apologize if I put you guys in a coma for all that yapping and stuff. So, but I appreciate your indulgence. Do you guys have any questions I can help answer?
You've been kind of grabbing them all out of the chat as we've gone along. Let me just roll back real quick and make sure were there any that we missed in there. And you guys, if you have other questions, you can unmute yourself right now if you want to ask directly too.
Okay. Yes, Blair.
Yes.
I'm a redhead. Lots
Angel.
of freckles.
Yes, wonderful.
Where did you find that beautiful red
You
put on that hair?
The red is really a strange. It's not like red out of the bottle. It's basically a burnt sienna. And for the shadows, I'm laying down first a red violet. I'm laying red violet down for the first.
Oh my!
Over it with burnt sienna, and the burnt sienna gives us that powerful orangish red color that we know and love.
I'm writing this down now. Red violet.
For the shadows. So I established the shadows and all the background color between the hairs with red violet. And then after that, I go in with the with burnt sienna. I spray burnt sienna. I glaze over it. I'm glazing over it. So I get all my details and textures down with the red violet. And then I go in with a burnt sienna, which is transparent, laying that transparent burnt sienna on top of it to kind of glaze over it to grab that, make that intense.
So, Drew, can you talk for a minute more about all of the different equipment that you would have to be an airbrush artist? What all do you have to have?
Well, after the airbrush, okay, I'll get my, after the airbrush, of course, you need a hose to hook it up to it. And the hose, I don't know if I've got one here. Got that one here, okay. An air hose, there's the air hose. And I just pretty much just screw that onto the bottom of it, and I've got air. Now, you also need an air source. You can use different air sources. You can get a compressor, which are kind of loud, but you can get air tanks. They make those. They also make fingernail compressors, which are really small, but an airbrush is going to need at least 20 pounds per square inch to operate. So some of those airbrushes, those fingernail airbrush setups they have are probably not strong enough. You need something that can make 20 PSI. And I would, the most expensive part is the air. The airbrush itself, you can buy one for $50, although I wouldn't buy one for $50 from Harbor Freight because you get what you pay for. I would say if you're going to get an airbrush, I would get something like a name brand. A name brand would be like Iwata. Iwata is a name brand. Let me see if I can just write that in the comments. That way you guys don't have to write it down. Iwata is a name brand airbrush that's actually, I recommend here. They make a model called an Eclipse. It's good for people just starting out. It's very forgiving. I would get one with a side cup too. See if you can find with a side cup, because they make some bottle feed cups, but the side cups are easier to use and easier to clean out. That's the model. And that's the airbrush is probably, it's under $200, probably between $100 and $200 for the Iwata Eclipse. Now I'm using
we didn't all see that message. It might have.
Oh, it was privately. I'm sorry. I went private. Thank you for I had some private kind messages. Thank you. Let me get out of private and go back to everyone. And there we go. We'll paste that. I apologize for that. And it's by, it's Iwata is the brand. I won't bother to capitalize it for the speed here, but Iwata is the brand. Iwata Eclipse. That's a good beginning airbrush. It's a very high quality airbrush, so you're getting a good value for it. The airbrush I'm using is water also, but it is a very expensive one. It's called a Micron. And this one is expensive. It's about $441 for this airbrush. It's very expensive. But the airbrush I use, I bought it in 1985, and I've used the same airbrush for every painting I've ever done. I have not switched airbrushes. It's actually, the chrome is actually wearing off of it. But it's like a pair of jeans. The longer you use it, the better it gets. It wears out and gets smoother and easier to use. So that's why I would recommend. I see my writing this down, but my website, if you're interested in seeing some of this equipment, I mean, we do sell my website, but you can go online and find stuff. As I'm at the schoolofrealism.com, and I have classes in Blair, South Carolina, but also down here in Charleston. I have another school in Charleston. It's more of a for children and adults. Airbrush is not even hardly a part of it. It's more. It's about 1,900 students, about 17 instructors here, and it's more for oil, acrylic, watercolor, pastel, drawing, everything pretty much. But airbrush, I've introduced airbrush to it in a very small, like 1% of the curriculum. But the school in Blair is an airbrush school, a proper airbrush school in Blair. So it's we usually teach about maybe 10 or 12 students at a time in 4-day workshops.
So you do all workshops. You don't do ongoing classes or anything like that.
No. Well, we used to try to do that, but adults seem to they don't have the time that an 18-year-old has. 18-year-old said 4 years for college, no problem. But an adult, it's like 4 days is a problem just to get away from, So we try to be understanding. We've also, as you guys have done, gone online, and I've started offering something called a classroom in a box. Basically, it's for people who just want to start airbrushing. And everything's in there except the airbrush. I probably should start selling that too. But it's basically a kit that gives you the reference photo, the paper, the tools, and paint. And basically, all you need is an airbrush and an air hose, and it's got online access to the videos and basically step by step for people who just want to pick up the airbrush and try it.
Okay, you have two other questions. One is, does the nozzle get clogged often?
No, it doesn't get clogged, but if you don't keep it clean, it will. So what you do is preemptively, I've gotten a habit of picking the nozzle. And what I mean by that is I don't know if you can see this, but on the tip of it, there's a little needle sticking out. I'll see if I can get really close to it. Probably not going to show me in focus. There's a little needle that sticks out there. And sometimes that'll build up paint on it. So what I do is I just take my fingernail and pick it off like that and keep it clean. I kind of pick it probably every minute or so just to preemptively stop it from clogging up. Because if it does clog up, that's usually where it is. The needle gets paint on, the paint dries on the needle, and it creates a dam and no paint wants to come out. So as long as you keep that needle clean, it'll go on and spray on and on and on.
Okay.
And the compressor, brand name compressor. Okay. There's different types of compressor. There's absolutely silent compressors that make no noise. They're very expensive though. They're $500 to $1,000 for one of those. But you can get quieter compressors for by Awada makes one. Awada makes a studio series they're not loud. I don't know if I can turn this on. It's not plugged in. But you can hear it. But it's not real loud. But you can hear it. It definitely makes some noise in the background. Not as loud as a hair dryer. But when it comes on, you can hear it. But you could talk on the phone while it's running. It's not that loud. Or you can buy an industrial or something from a hardware store for a couple $100. Or buy something used cheap, but those are like louder, the type they use to drive tools and things like that. So the solution for that is to buy a 100-foot air hose and stick that in a closet the other end of the house and listen to it. That's the poor man's version of a silent compressor, which I've used many times. Okay, the brand name would be Awada. Awada is a good silent compressor. The best, if you want the best compressor, the most quietest compressor, a company makes it called Silent Air, and I'll mention that to you. Silent Air. Out of Texas, Silent Air. Oh, my caps are locked. Okay, sorry about that. AIRE. They're out of Texas compressors, and they're expensive, but you get what you pay for in this world, right? So I would definitely avoid airbrushes that are $50 airbrushes. You can find $50 airbrushes all day at Harbor Freight and stuff like that, but they are junk. You will use them for 10 minutes and then they're just no good. So you're better off spending more money and getting something you actually use for your whole life than wasting your money on something that's going to break within a week or even an hour,
There was another question that came in a classroom, are you breathing a lot of paint, and how is this handled?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So I did, there's overspray. When you airbrush, you introduce some paint into the air. So what I did is I made a homemade air cleaner filter, and I'll show it to you here. I just made this little homemade thing. If that cord will let me reach. Okay, if you can see it, I basically took a box fan and strapped a filter on the front of it. Okay, it's about a 20 by 20 box fan, and I strapped a 20 by 20 filter on it with a bungee cord. And I don't know if I can see it in there because there's stuff blocking the way. The
Yeah.
microphone here. Let me see if I can move that. There we go. Okay. And that's basically my air filter. And I just sit that near and I run it up and I can adjust. It's quiet because it's just a simple box filter. You can also open a window. You could wear a mask, but we're all tired of wearing masks these days. But the paint can linger for maybe an hour or two after you spray it. So if you don't mind exhausting the paint out of your room, you can sit next to a window and send it out the window, but you're also sending out your air conditioning or heat out with it. So there's a blog on my website at schoolofrealism.com that talks about how to build one of these air cleaners for like $40 or less than $40 with a bungee cord, an air filter, and a box fan. And just set it next to your thing and it cleans the air out and you don't have to wear a mask or anything.
So how often do you have to change that filter then?
I haven't changed this filter about 2 months, so it's doing pretty well. But you don't spray a huge amount. Unless you're covering a whole surface of a canvas or something like that, you don't really spray a lot of paint out. A lot doesn't come out. In fact, if you're spraying minute amounts, I don't really wear a mask or turn that on. If I'm covering a whole background or something like that, then I'm introducing a lot more paint into the air and I'll turn on the fan next to it. Okay, but since we all have masks, it probably doesn't hurt, but I prefer if I'm gonna wear a mask, like in that condition, to wear the double cartridge respirator mask that, really filter everything out. But or go outside and spray. Sometimes I'll go outside and walk outside with an air hose and spray outside where if I've got a large thing to cover. I'm using water-based paint, so they're non-toxic, but it's still no good to breathe in, things like that, like dust and things like that. It's not good, not healthy for you. Okay, I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Other
Right.
questions?
Other questions, guys and girls? Some of you guys from Winsboro, I see. That's great. It's great to see you guys. Winsboro is right close to Blair. Blair's out in the middle of the country. It's in the middle of nowhere. And I built 2 school buildings on commercial land. We're so remote, though, so removed from civilization. It's 30 minutes to the nearest gas station out there. So we had to build a hotel for the students to stay in, and we had to get a cook. And so we had to be pretty much self-sufficient out there. And so you can see it on schoolofrealism.com about that class. Kind of see what we do out there.
Is Blair named for your family name?
Well, yes, my family settled down in the 1700s, and one guy had 14 children.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, they called it in around 1800s, and so they called it Blair's. And in the 1950s, they dropped the S. So I kind of moved back home to be my father before he passed away. I wanted to spend 10 years with him and move my school there too. And I didn't know if anybody was going to come to a school so remote, but it did really well. We offered a shuttle to the Charlotte airport, which is most convenient for them. And then we expanded to here in Charleston after that. So it's been very rewarding. As you know, our art is like therapy for all of us, and we didn't have an outlet to create, we'd suffer. So I'm very fortunate to be able to make a living and do this. Most of my income comes from product sales. My print sales, as I told you, they do very well, and that funded my school. The school was my hobby, basically. But now, it's been very successful. I'm very blessed, and been able to travel the world and do a lot of things. And so, I count my blessings for that. So
Do you do your own prints, or do you have someone that makes those prints for you?
I used to, when I started, I had someone else make it, but then I bought a Giclée printer, a big Giclée printer, and the Giclée printer, I can print them on demand now. So before, when you print with lithography, you had to print 1,000 prints to get the price down. Otherwise, your price is going to cost $50 a print. But you can get down to $2 or $3 a print with lithography. But with Giclée print, you can print on demand, and you don't have to print them until somebody orders them. And when they order it, you push the button and there you go. So that way I multiply myself, because there's only so many hours in the day that you can paint or create. And so by multiplying yourself in print, you can actually make your art affordable to the masses. And so I would recommend that to people, market your work and get into print if you can. All right, I hope that helps.
I talked with Alicia Blair
Oh, yes.
in Newberry, and I was visiting her and with another friend, and she called up to your facility and asked if we could come take a quick tour. And you weren't there at the time, but someone showed us around, and it's remarkable to see the airbrush artist in person.
Well, I apologize for the mess. It's probably a mess since last class. Once the class ended, I just left and came back to Charleston. So I apologize if it was in disarray there. But yes, 2 buildings up there in the studio, and that's where we do it. So hopefully drop by when I come back. I'll come back in October to do more classes there. I've kind of been waiting for this COVID thing to calm down before we do a lot of in-person classes. So I'm scheduled for October. Hopefully things will calm down and we can get back to normal again. That would be great.
Yeah, we all hope for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I appreciate your time and everything. I'm living part-time in Charleston mostly. Renee, there you are. I see you again. Part-time in Charleston, part-time in Blair. I bought a school here that was already in existence. Actually, I came out here, wanted to do a workshop, and I wanted to rent a space. And the lady who owned the building said, "Well, I'm thinking about selling this place in 3 years." So I said, "Oh, if you ever sell it, let me know. I'd like to buy it." And then in that conversation, it went from 3 years to 2 years to 3 months to when I left, I'd written her a check to buy the but it was a turnkey. It was already had teachers, already had students, so it was pretty easy to transition into it. But it's just it's an I would say it's an academic, not an administrative challenge, because there's 18 instructors, 1,900 students, and you've got there's 14 classes a day, and you got different classes every week. So it's definitely, you're juggling a lot of things at one time, and so I don't get that much time to paint as much as I'd like to now, until I can find an administrator to run everything, so I can get back to just painting and teaching.
Blair, what type of vitamins do you take? I cannot believe you have talked consistently and taught us so much. Oh,
Well, I'm glad.
thank you.
I hope I haven't bored you. I apologize if I have bored you.
No, you haven't at all.
I'm very passionate about what I do. I like all of us, you really get excited about it and enthusiastic, and you just, it makes you grab onto it, seize the moment,
Drew,
So-
what's the name of your studio in Charleston? That's another question that came
Oh,
in.
it is. Well, it was Creative Arts of Mount Pleasant, but is now Blair Center for the Arts. So I believe I'll type the website, Creative Arts. I still have the old school of MP, Creative Arts of MP.com. And that's the school is Creative Arts. I've got to learn to spell here. Arts, ARTS, Creative Arts of MP.com. There it is. So I'm sending the link there. creativeartsofmp.com. That's the old legacy site that we still have on there. You see oil. I've got some incredible instructors. We have 2 Italian classical trained artists here working with us too. We got photoreals. We have a pure abstract expressionist here. I mean, she is hardcore abstract. I mean, she lives and breathes it. Amazing woman. And she's taught me a lot about seeing the world differently. So I try to offer the largest range of styles and subjects as possible, to serve. It's about 65% children, 35% adults at this one. Whereas the school in Blair is 100% adults. It's an international school in Blair. About a third of the class is usually for foreign countries when we do the school in Blair. Right. And we're still, I am. Renee's asking. So I know Renee, because she was, I worked with her. I wanted to see about starting an art college, and I got ready for that. I was preparing for that, and I got distracted by my touring. I started touring around the world and kind of got away from that. But I am still thinking about doing that. I would like to have a school that teaches classical drawing and offers realism to people and things like that. For a lot of schools I've seen, I'm a victim of it. I'm not going to name names, but I went to school. They were like, throw a tomato at a canvas and call it art. So I didn't really learn any technique. I didn't learn any skills. They hated realism. I got a C in painting because I was painting representational work. And I vowed to myself, well, someday I'll do a school that embraces realism, because I like realism. I don't try to force it down anybody else's throat, but I enjoy the subject matter. And I appreciate abstract, painting too. There's some beautiful work out there, but I see where people poo-poo on realism, and I don't think that's right. I mean, I'm grateful that we have such diversity in the art world, because it makes it much more interesting. But I want to share, my knowledge and things like that with other people. And Renee was helping with the board for certifying colleges. And I know she's retired now, back to painting. I'm sure she's enjoying that. Yes, but the answer is yes. I still would love to do that. I'm actually talking to people about it. Some people have offered me some buildings and things like that to do that. Starting college is not easy though. You can't just start a college. You've got to jump through some hoops. You got to paperwork. You got to get all your ducks in a row. It's but I think we complete all the paperwork. We've done everything we did. We haven't submitted it yet, but we got everything ready for it. And it's a mountain of it. And we just, I was looking for a home or a place to start it, because I'd love to start a college of realism. Maybe down here in Charleston, because they had an art college here, and the parent company pulled out. So I think the Art Institute, they pulled out. They went out about 3 years ago. They stopped, closed a lot of their buildings, a lot of their schools, and I don't think they consolidated. They went out completely. Okay. But guys, if you guys want to, take a look at my site, you're welcome to. Also on Facebook, you can always message me there. Drew Blair on Facebook. School of Realism is also on Facebook, and Creative Arts of MP or Mount Pleasant is also on Facebook. So, drop me a line. I'd like to connect with other artists, obviously. So, and if you ever come down to Charleston, let me know. I'd love to give you a tour of the school down here and visit. Or if you're near Blair and I happen to be in Blair, feel free to come by.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I see Lainey. Oh, right, Lainey. I see some people give me some private message. That's fine. Also, guys, if you want to drop me a line, my email address, I'll go and type it in there. If you guys ever want to reach out to me and have a question, anything I can help you with, you have, like you say, you're interested in airbrushing or something I can give you some assistance with, I'm happy to reach out and help my fellow artists here. I'll go ahead and I'm going to type in my my email address there, so you can. It's my personal email address, and that way you can, if you want to contact me for any reason, I'm happy to connect with everybody. Drew@blaircenter.com. There it goes. Oops, I sent it privately. Sorry, I did not mean to do that. I'll send it back to everybody. It defaults to privately when somebody sends me a private message. All right, there we go. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helped everybody learn a little something about me, and I hope it didn't bore you too much.
I think that was
Not at
fabulous.
all.
Well,
Oh,
said
good.
very good job. Said, I know everybody was sitting on the edge of the seat. I know I was. And said, we really appreciate your being with us tonight and sharing all this.
It's my pleasure, my privilege.
And said, I said, your energy is just captivating, and it kept us all right there. But said, thank you again. And said, that was awesome. Thank you, thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
I do have Instagram too, by the way. If anybody, I'm Drew Blair. So you guys, thanks for the kind words everybody's sent me. I appreciate the private messages too, and the public one. Thank you so much. And if I can do anything for you guys, let me know. Hopefully I get a chance to see you guys in person someday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
I will see you guys later, and I'll sign off now.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Bye, Blair.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
You
Drew.
guys, good to see you.
Okay, next thing we got is our George prizes. So, woo! His name is Randy Spencer.
Ooh.
Oh, that was painful. Like,
Let me see.
He's there.
He's here.
Yep.
I
I've
can't
seen
believe how
him.
difficult that game is. And at one
Is
point in time,
Amy
I almost
Kane
broke my computer.
here?
Just been like, I can't.
No.
No.
It was like,
Linda Icarus.
Linda Eichhorst.
yeah.
No, I
but,
have not
mean,
seen
you
Linda
skip all-
tonight.
I mean, in reality, we just. skip
Ken
all- I don't know if you guys
Wilbank.
Actually play it.
Ken
I
is
just-
not on.
I
No.
mean, we're just skipping
Ken's
half this
not
stuff at this point, trying to just beat the
Ruby
level.
Deloach.
You know, I'm just
Yeah,
running
Ruby's
to the
on.
end at this point. I'm just like, let me get at least a flag, because
Okay.
I'm not getting nothing
So
else.
Ruby's number
Alex,
2.
you may want to mute.
I just muted her.
Okay.
Corey Ann Lacey.
No.
No,
No.
Marilyn Taylor.
No.
Jeez. Maureen Carter.
Yes, she
Yeah.
is.
Okay, that's 3, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Who was number 2? I missed it.
Linda Eichhorst.
No, she's not on. She wasn't on.
No, she wasn't on.
Ruby Deloach.
Ruby.
Ruby Deloach, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, because I'd already dropped them in the winners list.
Okay. Sorry.
No problem. All
Yeah.
right, well, thank you again. And Sandra, would you have like any closing remarks tonight?
Yes, there was a question that came up, and Kay, you may want to address this. Could anyone enter a print for the South Carolina Feathered Friends? And you and I sort of discussed it in chat, and the only prints would be photographs, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Because it should be your work, not a copy of your work.
Okay.
There was a question about contact information for Kay. I'm not sure if they were asking about Kay Stallings for the Juried show or Kay Fox for one of the other issues.
maybe Kate Stallings about picking up our art to let her know.
Kay, you want to let people know how best to reach you? You need to unmute yourself if you're going to talk.
Yes, my email is kstallings94@gmail.com. And my phone number is 770-289-2737.
Okay, there was a question about what's going on in the tap gallery after
Right.
until Feathered Friends go up.
Right, and I think Karen Larrabee was one that sent that, and I sent her a note back and said, why don't we, it never occurred to me that we've got a month in between time when things go down and things come back up again. So why don't we just say spring is here? And particularly those of you who are going to be picking your art up sometime this week, you may want to drop off a springtime painting for the tap gallery. And anyone who did not win an award, still drop off a painting.
There you go.
Now, how big is the easel have to be if you're submitting a painting?
Enough to
Can
support
it
your
sit on
painting.
the table or does it have to?
There will be some tables there that you could, if it's a tabletop and if it will support your painting. If, you know, a larger painting, of course, would take a larger easel, but either type of easel would work.
Make sure it supports yours and we could set a table up if we need to.
Anything else? Well, we will see one another in person at our next meeting.
Yay.
Yay. So
Wonderful.
now make sure that you're working on your paintings too. Looking forward to seeing everybody, and take care, be safe. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I have a new bulldog I wanted to introduce. if you
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
mind.
Show us Oliver.
Where's Oliver? Aw, he was hiding.
Oh,
Now you have to talk.
Well,
Yeah,
Switch
talk
over
so you go to the
to
center of the screen,
Okay.
Sonia.
Oh, looky.
He's so
Oh.
cute.
Speak, Sonia, so we can see you full
This is
screen.
Colonel Oliver. He's 4 months old as of yesterday. English Bulldog, and General Smedley finally let him play with toys about a week ago. So we're settling in. He's doing great.
That's
He's a
awesome.
I can tell he's real
sweetheart.
excited. I can tell he's real excited about all this.
Well, he is an English Bulldog. And it is late in the evening.
He's a sweet, sweet dog, though.
Wanted y'all to see him because
Where's your dog, Barbara?
portrait's coming.
Yeah, my dog is actually shut outside the room tonight. She's with Brian, poor thing.
I know, she usually gets lovies from you during
I
the
know,
meeting.
she usually sits in my lap.
How about you, Sandra? Where are yours?
One is asleep on the floor, the other is looking at me, and I had to pull out the eardrops to get the one on the floor asleep. So he started barking during Drew's presentation, so I took him out and brought him back in and shut him the eardrops. So he's lying on the floor pretending not to notice. Right then, everyone have a good night.
You
Have a good
too.
week, and I'll look forward to seeing some of you at the Coger Center.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Leave meeting. There we go.